Okay, good evening. The November 19th, 2020 meeting of the Woodbridge Township Board of Education will please come to order. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Bourdain?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello? Here. Mr. Treewasser?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
And Mr. Delapietro.
Here. Mr. Secretary, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the reading of notice of meetings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows. August 12, 2020, emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office, posted in Avenel Middle School and the Board of Education Administration Building, also published on the school district website.
Okay. Ms. Anderson, please read the closed statement, session statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to motion for the approval of the following closed session statement. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board must go into closed session in order to discuss subjects exempt from the public portion of our meeting. The discussions to be held in closed session will be regarding personnel matters. Any information regarding the closed session discussion will be released to the public when the reasons for discussing these matters in closed session no longer exist.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Molnar. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries.
Mr. Secretary, can you make a note Mr. Harris is here?
So noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, the board's going to retire to closed session. We'll be back no earlier than 6:30. Thank you. Please rise for a salute to the flag and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, do I have a motion to reconvene?
So motion?
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Treewasser. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Bourdain?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Yes, here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello? Here. Mr. Treewasser?
Here.
Mr. Velez? Here. Mr. Delapietro.
Here. Okay. Mr. Secretary, just make a note that Mr. Sedana is out on a, not with us tonight due to a family matter.
So noted.
Okay, will someone make the motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting?
So motion.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Treewasser. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record any notice of bids received by the board.
Mr. President, there are none at this time.
Okay. Okay, to facilitate the flow of this meeting, all questions and comments from the public will be addressed after the presentation of all agendas. By order of the governor, we are limited to a capacity to 25 people in the room at one time. We ask that once you have made your comments and listened to the response, if any is given, to please vacate the room and allowing another speaker the opportunity to comment. This is a request, not a demand. Thank you for your consideration. Dr. Zaga, please state for the record Superintendent's report for the month of October 2020.
Mr. President, I have the following reports to present to the board: the student registers and the security and fire drill reports, suspension reports for elementary and secondary schools, bomb threat reports, and reports of the attendance officers.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Zaga, do you have any recommendations?
Mr. President, I have 14 items to present to the board.
Okay, do I have a motion for the superintendent's agenda?
So motion?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Treewasser. Any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello? Mr. Treewasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez? Yes. And Mr. Delapietro.
Yes. Okay, policy and planning, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Policy and Planning Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following 8 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Tamburello. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. President,
Mr. Molnar?
just on items 1 through 5, just a big thank you to the generosity of our residents and our businesses in town, helping us out with PPE and other things.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar. Any other comments from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello? Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
And Mr. Della Pedra.
Yes. Curriculum, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Curriculum Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, present the following 3 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Tamburello. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none? Roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello? Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
And Mr. Della Pedra.
Yes. Finance and Insurance, Mr. Tamburello.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following 13 items. This evening, I move for the adoption of the foregoing 13 items.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Tamburello. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Treebwasser. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. President?
Mr. Molnar?
On item number 5, the transfer number 1, the $240,000 that's going to district tuition, private, in-state, out-of-district tuition, is that caused by the pandemic? Do we have students that are leaving to go out of district? Or is that just something that where tuition prices have gone up or transportation has gone up? Through the chair?
Yep. The answer to that is it is mostly due to cost, unrelated to COVID. There probably are a few students related to that, but the bulk of this is something that's been going on based on the cost of the tuition.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
And Mr. Della Pedra.
Yes. Technology, Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Technology Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following 2 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Ms. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Tamburello. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
And Mr. Della Pedra.
Yes. Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Della Pedra. The Buildings and Grounds Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Business Administrator, present the following 9 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Mr. Molnar. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Della Pedra.
Yes. Transportation, Mr. Velez.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Transportation Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, present the following 2 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Velez. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Tamburello. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Della Pedra.
Yes. Personnel, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Personnel Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, presents the following. Tonight, I'll be moving 30 items.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Second by Mr. Harris. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
I will be abstaining on item 12 in the name of Michael Henderson. I vote no on item 17, yes on all other items.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
And Mr. Della Pedra.
Yes. Okay, Ari, do you have any recommendations? None. Okay, is there any old business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Okay, seeing none. Is there any new business that should be brought to the attention of the board?
Mr. President?
Ms. Anderson?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to update everyone. As you know, for the month of November, we are celebrating Native American Heritage Month. So at the conclusion of the month, we will, on our website, post a slideshow of how each of our schools celebrated Native American Heritage Month, and we also will include some of our Diwali celebrations. So at the end of the month, probably the first week of December, check our website to see those celebrations. Thank you.
Any other new business? Mr. Harris?
Still picture, thank you very much. I wanted to highlight 3 non-agenda items tonight, one of them being our RISE employers. We have 14 employers, typically we have about double that in a non-pandemic, who host our 18 to 21-year-old students in our RISE program for a structured learning experience. And that's where students learn workforce skills. So I just want to give thanks to those companies who've bravely taken on our students and provide them with employment and workforce skill opportunities. I'll just read them off real quick, and you'll see this on the TV 35 website, TV 36 website, as well as the school district website. I'll be sending that out to you, Dr. Zega, very shortly. Advanced Auto Parts of Woodbridge, AP Hotel in Island, CNC Towing and Auto Repair in Fords, Chartwells, which is the school district food services vendor, Edible Arrangements of Woodbridge, Olive Garden of Woodbridge, Pizza Hut of Hope Lawn, Retro Fitness of Woodbridge, Rising Up Garden Center of Avenel, ShopRite of Woodbridge, Walgreens, the 2 locations in Colonia, one on St. George Avenue and Inman Avenue. Woodbridge Township, they host a student at Town Hall, Evergreen Senior Center and Teen Center in Colonia, as well as Mayor Max Cafe in the Port Reading section. And then finally, our school district, we also host students in the administration building, as well as the, at Colonia Middle School for the child study team operation over there. So just want to recognize those employers for taking on our students, providing them with a great opportunity. Nextly, Alyssa's Law. That was a law that was put on the books by the state legislature, and school districts had an opportunity to apply for reimbursement through the 2018 state bond question that we were all asked, that afforded the state of New Jersey $500 million in funding known as the Securing Our Children's Future Bond Act, and that's for school districts to apply for funding. $75 million was available or is available to school districts. And I want to thank Mr. Wolferman, our security coordinator, Brian Small, and then from the business administrator's office, Erica Mitchie, for putting in for reimbursement. We are in compliance with Alyssa's Law. It's a requirement concerning security alarms in the event of a number of different criminal activities, what have you. So we are taking the due diligence to apply for that money from the state of New Jersey. You, the state taxpayers, provided us with that funding, and we're going to go out and get it. So I want to thank Mr. Wolferman and his team for doing so. Nextly, there's $100 million out there for water infrastructure, and I know Mr. Wolferman said they're going to take a look into applying into that fund. The purpose of that fund is to remediate lead service lines, typically your water fountains or what have you. I know that's lead water is something we've long monitored since it came on the public radar. So we'll have a pot of money to tap into if and when we need the money, as well as we're eligible for it. And finally, Mr. Della Pietra, the 4 vocational technical schools that I always talk about here in Middlesex County, typically every November, our middle schools will host an open house, an in-person open house for students and parents to meet representatives from, the 5 vocational technical schools. This year, obviously, they can't do in-person open house. Rather, they're going to do a virtual open house. They're going to be sending us those links, which I'll make sure Dr. Zega is familiar with, and we get it out to our middle school students. For when they choose, when they go to high school, they have obviously our 3 traditional high schools to choose from, as well as the 5 vocational technical schools that Middlesex County offers for free of charge. And in addition to the virtual open houses that they're looking to host, their counselors, their school counselors are available to parents and students via a personal invitation via Zoom. So the VOTECs are adjusting like everybody else, and middle school students looking to choose a vocational technical high school as their high school option, they'll have the opportunity to learn more about those schools virtually rather than in person. Thank you, Mr. Delapietro, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any other new business?
Mr. President?
Mr. Mueller?
Just real quick, as I know we're going to be venturing off the next couple weeks on a different way of learning, I just want to wish everybody, all our students, our parents, our staff, everybody associated with the school district, I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. You know, take this time to, you know, to be with your family. You know, celebrate it smart, celebrate it safe, so that we could all come back and, you know, eventually, if we do this right, we could be back in the classroom on January 19th, what we're all anticipating. Hopefully this break will put in incubation periods around the Thanksgiving holiday and around, you know, the Christmas, Hanukkah holidays. And, you know, we'll be able to get back into the classroom. But just everybody be safe, and we'll see you back, you know, hopefully January 19th, we could be back in the classroom again learning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mueller. Anyone else? Okay, I just have one. I'd like to thank County Fire Marshal Michael Gallagher from the Middlesex County Fire Academy and the instructors who came and fit tested all of our school nurses for their PPE. He was a great help getting us to get that accomplished. I'd like to thank him for that. Okay, I'll close out new business. Okay, if you wish to say something, please come to the microphone, provide your name and section of the township in which you reside for the record. Please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes in accordance with Regulation 1100D. No response will be given until you have fully completed all of your comments, as to not to interrupt your 5 minutes of opportunity to speak. For those residents who are unable to attend tonight's meeting in person, you can email your comments to the superintendent at woodbridge.k12.nj.us. So at this time, I'll open it up to the public. Seeing none. Dr. Zega, any emails tonight?
Mr. President, I have one email from a Ms. Rivera in Fords. With the announcement of all students being fully remote until January 19th, I want to find out, will the teachers still be present in the school buildings for live instruction every day to teach the students, or will the teachers not be on live instruction at all? Also, does this cancel the winter sports season? The teachers will be live either from their classrooms or from home. And as far as we know, the winter sports season is postponed until after the new year, but it will still continue as of this moment.
Okay.
Word about the winter sports will be sent out from each individual high school.
Any other emails? That's it? Just the one? That's it. Okay, seeing no other emails, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motion?
Second? Second. Okay. Motion, meeting adjourned.